Welcome to our channel. Today, we're debunking 6 myths Hollywood films get wrong about the Old West. You know, that dusty sepia-toned world of saloons, showdowns, and six-shooters? Yeah, turns out it's not quite as simple as those classic westerns would have us believe. The Old West, a period roughly spanning from the mid-1800s to the early 1900s, was a time of immense change and upheaval in American history. It was a period of westward expansion, gold rushes, and conflicts with Native American tribes. But it was also a period of incredible diversity, innovation, and yes, even law and order. So saddle up and grab your metaphorical 10-gallon hats as we separate fact from fiction and delve into the real history of the American West. Okay, let's address the elephant in the saloon, or rather, the myth of the lawless West. Hollywood loves to portray the Old West as a place where might made right, and disputes were settled with a duel at high noon. But the truth, as always, is a bit more nuanced. While it's true that the frontier presented unique challenges to law enforcement, it wasn't a complete free-for-all. Towns often had sheriffs, marshals, and even vigilante groups to maintain order. And as settlements grew, so did their legal systems, establishing courts and codifying laws. For example, let's look at the mining towns that sprung up during the gold rush. These boomtowns, often depicted as dens of chaos, actually developed surprisingly sophisticated legal codes to deal with mining claims, property disputes, and even water rights. And remember those iconic cowboys? Well, many of them were just ranch hands, herding cattle and doing honest work. They relied on law and order to protect their livelihoods and settle disputes just like anyone else. Of course, there were instances of violence and lawlessness, especially in remote areas. But to say the entire West was a lawless wasteland is a gross exaggeration. It's like judging a book by its most dramatic chapter. The reality is that most people in the Old West, just like today, wanted to live peaceful, productive lives. And for that, they needed some semblance of law and order. So, the next time you see a Western where the streets are ruled by outlaws, remember that Hollywood is taking some liberties with history. The real Old West was a much more complex and nuanced place. This myth is a tough one because it's rooted in a very real and tragic history of conflict between Native Americans and settlers moving west. But Hollywood often simplifies this complex relationship into a tired trope: cowboys versus Indians, locked in an eternal struggle. The reality, however, is far more nuanced. While there were undoubtedly instances of violence and warfare, there were also periods of peace, cooperation, and even alliances between cowboys and Native Americans. For instance, many cowboys learned essential skills like horsemanship and cattle herding from Native American tribes, and during certain periods, different tribes and groups of settlers even formed alliances against common enemies or to achieve shared goals. It's also important to remember that the term Indian is itself a misnomer, a catch-all phrase that obscures the incredible diversity of Native American cultures and tribes that existed in the West. Each tribe had its own unique language, customs, and history, and their relationships with settlers varied greatly. To portray this complex history as a simple cowboys versus Indians narrative is not only inaccurate, but also perpetuates harmful stereotypes. It diminishes the rich tapestry of cultures and experiences that shaped the American West. So let's challenge this Hollywood myth and acknowledge the full spectrum of interactions between cowboys and Native Americans, from conflict to cooperation and everything in between. Picture this: a dusty street, tumbleweeds rolling by, and every single person walking around with a six-shooter strapped to their hip. That's the image Hollywood often paints of the gun-slinging Old West. But was it really a place where everyone and their grandma owned a firearm? Well, not quite. While guns were certainly more prevalent in the Old West than in some other places and times, they were far from ubiquitous. In fact, owning a gun, especially a handgun, was relatively expensive and often impractical for everyday life. Think about it: carrying a heavy firearm everywhere you went would get old fast. And then there's the issue of accidental discharge, which was a real concern in a time before modern safety mechanisms. Now, this isn't to say that guns weren't a part of life in the Old West. They were used for hunting, self-defense in remote areas, and yes, sometimes for less than noble purposes. But the romanticized image of quick-draw shootouts on every street corner, that's largely a Hollywood invention. In reality, many towns had ordinances restricting the carrying of firearms within city limits. And even in less settled areas, most folks understood the potential dangers of readily available firearms and treated them with caution. So, while the Old West might not have been the gun-free utopia some might imagine, it was also far from the trigger-happy free-for-all depicted in many westerns. The truth, as always, lies somewhere in between. Chapter 4. Myth number 4, Beyond the Saloon Doors, the Real Heart of Old West Towns. Ah, the saloon. The dimly lit, piano-playing, whiskey-soaked heart of every Hollywood Western. It's where cowboys gambled away their wages, brawls erupted over spilled drinks, and the fate of the town was often decided. But was the saloon truly the epicenter of social life in the Old West? Well, it was certainly one important piece of the puzzle. Churches played a vital role, providing spiritual guidance and social gatherings. Schools were essential for educating the next generation. Businesses like general stores and blacksmith shops were social hubs too. Traveling shows, rodeos, and community dances offered entertainment. The Old West had a rich and varied social fabric beyond the saloon. Chapter 5. Myth number 5, The Faces of the Frontier Beyond the Whitewashed West. Hollywood often presents the Old West as a predominantly white affair, with cowboys, lawmen, and settlers all fitting a specific mold. But this portrayal ignores the incredible diversity that truly defined the American frontier. The truth is, the Old West was a melting pot of cultures and ethnicities, a place where people from all walks of life converged in search of opportunity, adventure, or simply a fresh start. African Americans, for example, played a significant role in shaping the West, with many escaping slavery to find freedom and opportunity on the frontier. They worked as cowboys, farmers, entrepreneurs, and even lawmen, challenging racial barriers and contributing to the growth of Western communities. Then, there were the Mexican Americans who, for generations, had called the land their own, long before it became part of the United States. They brought with them their rich culture, traditions, and expertise in ranching, farming, and navigating the challenging terrain. And let's not forget the Chinese immigrants who, despite facing discrimination and prejudice, played a vital role in building the Transcontinental Railroad, connecting the East Coast to the West, and transforming the nation. These are just a few examples of the many groups whose stories are often overlooked in traditional Western narratives. The Old West was a tapestry woven from the threads of countless cultures, and to ignore this diversity is to miss out on the full richness of its history. So let's challenge the whitewashed version of the West often presented in film, and recognize the contributions of all those who helped shape this complex and fascinating period in American history. Chapter 6, Myth number 6, Beyond the Dusty Plains, the Varied Landscapes of the Old West. When we think of the Old West, what often comes to mind is a vast, desolate desert baking under the relentless sun. And while deserts are certainly a part of the Western landscape, this singular image does a disservice to the incredible geographical diversity of the region. The Old West wasn't just one big desert. It encompassed a wide range of ecosystems, from towering mountain ranges to lush forests, fertile valleys, and windswept plains. Each region had its own unique climate, flora and fauna, shaping the lives and livelihoods of the people who called it home. For example, the Pacific Northwest, often shrouded in mist and rain, was a world away from the arid landscapes of the Southwest. Its towering forests provided timber for a booming lumber industry, while its rivers teemed with salmon, supporting Native American communities for centuries. Then there were the Rocky Mountains, a formidable barrier that tested the mettle of even the hardiest pioneers. But these mountains also held hidden treasures, sparking gold and silver rushes that drew fortune seekers from around the globe. And let's not forget the Great Plains, a seemingly endless expanse of grasslands that sustained massive herds of bison, and provided grazing land for cattle ranches that would become synonymous with the cowboy way of life. To reduce the Old West to a single, monotonous landscape is to ignore the incredible natural wonders that shaped its history and continue to captivate our imaginations today. So, let's appreciate the full spectrum of environments that make up this vast and varied region. So long, partner, until next time in the wild. Well, not so Wild West. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more historical debunking. The Old West, a period often romanticized and mythologized, was a far more complex and nuanced place than Hollywood would have us believe. By digging beneath the surface of these myths, we gain a deeper appreciation for the real people, places, and events that shaped this pivotal chapter in American history. So the next time you watch a Western, remember to take it with a grain of salt, or maybe a pinch of dust from the open range. And always keep in mind that the most fascinating stories are often the ones that challenge our assumptions and reveal the multifaceted nature of the past.